So, when I was 7 years old, I used my endless free time writing stories. Now, these stories concerned the most pressing issues that I faced as a child. They were about the conflicts between the elephants and the pigs, or about children off to the next great adventure. I poured my heart and soul into these stories, crafting them ever so carefully. And being the determined but stubborn young girl that I was, I decided to become an author. And so I wrote a storybook full of narration and vividly colored pictures, and it was published, but only within the four walls of my house. But you see, in my brain, in my 7-year-old brain, I saw myself as a credited best-selling author, and to me, that was all that mattered. But like all children, that was not all who I aspired to be. In fact, I saw the outcome of my life looking something like this. Now, as you can see, I clearly thought I had an equal chance of becoming Iron Man, a spy, or a best-selling author. But what I want you all to notice is the variety of careers you see here, the variety of possibilities that I saw myself go into. And I want you to keep that in mind, because we're going to come back to it. You see, as children, we're not particular about the activities we choose to engage ourselves with. We simply choose to do what we enjoy, and that's fine. Because as children, we haven't developed the need to set ourselves long-term or short-term goals. We are vulnerable in the face of our future, and this vulnerability empowers us when we're young, pushes us to reconstruct the images of who we aspire to be. So what I wanted to figure out is, why do we feel compelled to run away from this vulnerability when we become young adults? Why do we feel the need to define ourselves and our futures right now? And that's when I figured it all out. There is actually a psychological aspect to this all. Now, this may seem a little complicated at first, but let me break it down for you. You see, everyone has this natural mechanism within them, something that I like to call the beautiful white dove. Now this dove, this is who we are as children. We are vulnerable. We want to fly anywhere and everywhere. We want to try everything and anything. This dove is what makes us want to be superheroes one day and a spy the next. And this dove keeps doing just that, but only for the earlier years of our lives. Then there comes a point when something else is awakened, something that I like to call the practical, but time-obsessed giant. Now, this giant, very practical, very reasonable, and it has good intentions. It what makes us realize the time we have to achieve our goals. It what makes us realize that we should focus on something specific, something that will hopefully lead us to happiness and success. Which makes sense. We should work towards our goals, because how else will we achieve them? But then what ends up happening is that we fall into this trap of only ever exploring our options within a single field of interest, forgetting that they're allowed to overlap and still be functional. We fall into this trap of letting our future distant goals define what we do right now. And that's when we begin to limit ourselves. That's when our goals, rather than allowing us to achieve success, limit us. But that is not to say that between this dove and giant, that we completely ignore our giant. In fact, what we should do is we should keep our ambition, we should keep that ambitious fire, but do not simply direct it down a singular path. We always hear of individuals such as J.K. Rowling and Michael Jordan that achieve success only after failing multiple times. But what about those that achieved unexpected success? Those who experienced success they had never imagined in the first place, simply because they opened themselves up to a variety of possibilities. Stuart Butterfield, the co-founder of Flickr, is a big encourager of having an experimental attitude. It is the same experimental attitude that allowed Julia Child to become a world-renowned chef only after being a CIA agent, or that allowed everyone's favorite, Dwayne Johnson, to go from wrestling to acting. This is the power of the experimental attitude. When we stop focusing on just our goals and explore things beyond, that's when we achieve success that we had never imagined in the first place. And that's when we begin to realize all that we could possibly achieve. Now, remember the graph from earlier about children concerning their mindsets and their future careers? When we become young adults or even adolescents, our goals begin to look something like this. Which makes sense. This is the practical and realistic graph. This is what we should be achieving. Because we should strive for a goal that will lead us to a stable financial stability and emotional stability. But do you notice that we no longer allow ourselves a possibility of exploring something we had never imagined in the first place? Because that's what scares us. We do not want to be in the unknown. We don't want to be something because then we don't know what to do. But instead, what I'm saying is that we should embrace this vulnerability. We should embrace this possibility. In fact, between our doves and our giants, we should let our giants remind us of our priorities and keep us grounded, but let our doves fly a little. Let our giants remind us of our goals, but let our doves explore another one, a bigger one. And so what I think is really necessary is for all of us to adopt the experimental attitude, because we have abandoned our youthful tendencies to spontaneously engage in whatever our heart desires. And while we should take the steps necessary to achieve our goals, these end up being the only steps that we take. When we give up the power to control these steps begin to control us. And when we give up this power, that's when our futures begin to define our presents. So embrace the experimental attitude. Embrace that vulnerability. Forget what's next, and instead focus on what now. Thank you.